Hey guys, it's Dr. D. Checking in with you guys again. Hope you're well. It's been a little while. Today I'm going to be recording a pretty short video to start, mostly just because we've covered a lot of this stuff. But if you recall, we've been talking about monopolies. And the problem with monopolies are, if you recall, twofold. One is that they have market power. And this leads to, as we talked about, compared to monopolistic competition as well, we're going to have a price that's greater than the marginal cost. That's bad because price is the marginal benefit that people are revealing, and also we're going to have a price greater than average total cost, which is itself greater than minimum average total cost. In the long run, right? Otherwise, you won't. And that's one side of it. The other side is that we have no entry. This first one leads to deadweight loss, or this first kind of market power leads to deadweight loss, which is always bad. No entry just means that you'll get profits consistently, and I talked about that a little bit. It's not in our models, right? So it's not like a straight up. But you can kind of think about when you have no entry, that leads to persistent economic profits, which you might think would be good for for a company, but it turns out that in practice it seems to be the case that when you have persistent economic profits, there's no competitive pressure, there's no market discipline, and you can this turns into one big ugly bargaining game between interested parties, right, between the constituencies to try to carve up those profits. With no market discipline, you can get sclerosis, and you get union negotiations fighting with management and the whole thing. You get overweening pension programs and all sorts of stuff. And that's just one way you get. Another thing would be executives feathering nests, and it's not good. Right? You get sclerosis, leads to negative culture, and so this is one of the why we think these are social problems. One is deadweight loss, which we always hate, and the other is just bad culture, corporate culture, and that can lead to just broader cultural concerns. All right, so today what I want to talk about is government policies that reduce market power. And I'm not going to get real in depth with these. I just kind of want to give you a few ideas what we might expect to see. So, what happens? Well, often, local governments, they'll provide a monopoly right to a utility, and they'll set up a pricing board to try to regulate the prices. And so, that's one possibility is to do optimal price regulation. You can have natural monopolies, right? I mean, there's only so much you can do to prevent monopolies from existing. And you should do, as a governor, as a social planner, as a policymaker, you should do what you can to reduce monopolies. That's a good thing. But there's only so much you can do to prevent monopolies, and once you have them, you have to regulate them. But it can lead to problems, right? There are problems with this. One is you're going to have bad prices a lot of the times. In principle, you want price to be equal to marginal cost. It's hard to get that information. And so lots of times instead, the second best might be setting price equal to average cost. Average cost pricing. But bad prices are the result of costly, not expensive because that's longer to write, costly information. Just to get this information is costly. And those are resources that you're spending just to regulate monopoly, and so those are unproductive resources. And so that information, it's useful insofar as it eats into deadweight loss, but even in that case, you're talking about a second best world. Because this information is costly, the people who are in the best position to have it are generally stakeholders in the monopoly. And so the regulators end up being people who work there. And so you can have corruption that results what's sometimes called the revolving door problem, right? which is to say that, hey, if you want to regulate airlines, you need to know something about how airlines make their prices and what's reasonable and what will put them out of business. Who do you ask? Well, generally, if you want to ask people about airlines, you ask people who work for the airlines. Otherwise, you're just going to get bad information. But if you ask people who work for the airlines, if they worked for the airlines for a long time and then they go into public service, what's to say they're not going to go back into the working for the private sector again? And then there's a really strong incentive to put into place regulations that will put you in a good position. Certainly not to hinder the industry that you intend to make your money from, make your retirement from, right? And then on the other side, I mean, you go too far in the wrong direction, you get a potential shutdown, right? This thing exists because there's a demand for it. We want this product to continue to be provided, but if prices are too low, then there'll be no profit, right? Or there'll be negative profits that will persist, and the firm will shut down. And so that's one of the problems with regulation. Regulation is that you impose costs on firms, and if those costs are too onerous, firms will just exit the market. Because even entry is blocked, but exiting the market is always an option for a monopolist. They can always just quit. So we got some. So that's those are some of the problems with optimal price regulation. As a result, one of the really nice technologies we have invented is markets, and so there are ways to try to increase competition. That's the other kind of solution. So how do you increase competition? Well, one way is to just break up monopolies insofar as is possible. And the way you can break up monopolies, ways to think about this, are ways to think about how you form monopolies, right? You form monopolies with horizontal integration, potentially, or vertical integration. And so these are ways that you can look to break up monopolies, right? So horizontal integration. There we go. Horizontal integration is when you buy up all your competitors, and in this case, you break one firm into many similar firms, maybe regional, right? And then allow them to try to compete to get their business back. And that was like breaking AT&T up into the baby bells, right? You had all these regional carriers. And so that's something that can be done. And then at least on the edges, on the margins, they're competing. And then you can look at those edges of the markets, right? So let's say, for example, Comcast is a really big cable provider. You could break them up into a bunch of smaller firms that all compete with each other. And then wherever the markets overlap, you can get an idea for what the real prices are. At least reduces and alleviates some of the issues. Vertical integration, right? What you can do here is you can have the company that laid the wires and then provided the services might be the same company. You can break them up into infrastructure and service provision. Infrastructure versus, and then you could have many service providers. And this is a lot of what's been done with deregulation in some of these monopolies, is that you have many service providers that all get common carriage, right, on the infrastructure. So, for example, there might be one gas pipeline or one set of gas pipelines that runs to people's homes, but you might be able to buy your gas from lots of different places, and then they're competing on the administration and on the other source of costs, right, marketing and all that stuff. So those are your options. I mean, you have a monopoly. You can try to increase competition. Oh, one other one. Whoa. What am I saying? There's one more big one, which is often unpopular, but is really a good idea often, which is opening up foreign trade. And this is particularly noteworthy right now because in the United States, the airlines are finally starting to conglomerate again after a lot of time. There was a long period of time where you had lots of low-cost competition, and airlines were very unprofitable. And now they're starting to get larger, and presumably with their increase in size, they'll have more market power. And so it would be nice to have more competition, opening up foreign trade by reducing regulations, reducing international regulations, like tariffs, right? Allowing foreign air carriers to have domestic flights would be a good idea insofar as it would reduce monopoly power and it would allow for more competition. And when you have more competition, then people are competing. They're competing on price. They're competing on quality. So yeah, so there you go. Those are your options, right? So you have a monopoly. You can increase competition by breaking up the monopolies or opening up foreign trade. You can try to regulate the price by setting the price. There are pricing boards, and oftentimes this works when you can't increase competition. But there are concerns. Anyway, hope you guys find that useful. That just about does it for monopolies. I'll be talking to you again soon. So, bye.